I didn't raise my voice in court. I didn't cry. I didn't even look at my family when they called me a liar. I just waited, because I knew the moment the judge opened my envelope, the room would split in two. People who were shocked and people who were terrified. My aunt actually smirked when her lawyer said she kept him from his real family for years. She stopped smirking when the judge lifted her eyes and asked, "Why does this child's name appear on a financial application tied to an active fraud investigation?" And suddenly, the same people who said I stole a child were the ones trying to quietly leave the courthouse without making eye contact. I used to have a life that was small in the best way, simple, quiet, and predictable. My name is Ava Klein. For years, I worked nights as a dispatch coordinator for a private ambulance company. Not the hero in the back of the rig, the person behind the radio, the one who keeps her voice steady when other people are falling apart. I lived in a small apartment above a bakery that started baking at 4 a.m. I'd come home smelling like stale coffee and fluorescent lights, then fall asleep to cinnamon and bread. I had plants. I had routines. I had a tiny savings account I was proud of. And I had one rule I built my whole adult life around: no chaos. My family had enough chaos for 3 lifetimes. I'd spent years building something that couldn't be hijacked by their disasters. Then, on a Tuesday in late August, so hot the air felt sharp, someone knocked on my door so hard I thought it might crack. When I opened it, my brother was standing there. Not the version of him from childhood, the one who used to sneak me extra fries and defend me when our parents fought. This version looked hollow, sweat-stained shirt, wild eyes, hands shaking like his bones didn't fit right, and beside him was a kid. A little boy, maybe 6 years old, holding a plastic grocery bag like it contained his entire world. He was painfully clean, like someone had scrubbed him too hard. His backpack straps were twisted. One shoelace was missing. My brother didn't say hello. He didn't ask if I could help. He just pushed the boy forward like he was a package and said, "You have to keep him for a while." I blinked, like my brain couldn't load the sentence. "What, keep who?" He nodded at the kid. "Ethan." The boy looked up at me and whispered, "Hi." Something in my throat tightened in a way I didn't recognize. I stared at my brother. "Where, Marin?" Marin was Ethan's mother, my brother's on-and-off girlfriend, a woman who treated responsibility like a prank. My brother swallowed hard and rubbed his face like his skin hurt. "She's gone." "I can't," he swallowed again. "I can't do this right now." I stepped back. "You can't do what? Parent your child." He flinched like I'd hit him. Then he did something that still makes my stomach drop when I remember it. He reached into his pocket and shoved a crumpled envelope into my hand. Inside were copies of Ethan's birth certificate, a clinic printout, and a handwritten note on lined paper that looked like it had been torn from a cheap notebook. "He likes pancakes. He's scared of thunderstorms." "Don't tell him I'm leaving, please." I looked up. My brother was already backing away, eyes darting like a trapped animal. "Ava," he said quickly, "don't call Mom, don't call anyone, just please." And then he walked away, not dramatically, not crying. He just walked down the stairs, crossed the street, and disappeared into heat shimmer like a mirage. Ethan stood on my welcome mat holding his plastic bag, blinking against the sunlight. He didn't scream. He didn't run after him. He didn't even ask where his dad was going. He just looked at me and said very quietly, "Am I in trouble?" I did what any sane person would do. I called my mother. She picked up on the second ring, already irritated. "What now?" I tried to keep my voice steady. Leon dropped Ethan at my place. There was a pause, then a sigh that sounded like she'd been waiting years to be inconvenienced by someone else's emergency. "And," she said, "and I don't know what's happening. He just left him here." My mother's tone went flat, clinical. "Well, then he's yours for now." I blinked. "What do you mean he's mine?" "You always were the responsible one," she said, like it was a compliment instead of a sentence. "Figure it out." I could feel my pulse in my ears. "Mom, he's a child." "I'm not raising another one," she snapped. "I did my time. Don't bring this mess to my door." And then she said the line that lodged itself in my brain like glass. "If you keep him, don't expect us to pretend you're a hero." Then she hung up. I sat on my kitchen floor with the phone in my hand, staring at nothing, while Ethan quietly opened my fridge like he'd done it before somewhere else. He pulled out a bottle of water, held it up, and asked, "Can I?" I nodded because I couldn't find words. "Yeah, of course." He took a sip, then looked at me and said like he was reciting a rule, "I'm not supposed to be loud." That's when I realized this kid didn't just get dropped off. He got trained to take up as little space as possible. The first week wasn't parenting, it was triage. I called my brother until my fingers ached. No answer, texted, nothing. I drove to his last known address, gone. I bought kid food, kid toothpaste, kid pajamas. I learned Ethan's strange little routines like I was studying for an exam that could ruin us if I failed. He lined up his shoes perfectly by the door. He flinched when I moved too fast. He ate like someone might take the food away mid-bite. At night, he'd sit stiffly on my couch and ask, "Do you want me to sleep on the floor?" "No," I said immediately. "You sleep in the bed, I'll take the couch." He stared at me like I'd offered him the moon. The second night, he wet the bed. He tried to hide the sheets in the bathtub like it was evidence of a crime. When I found him standing there shaking, his face was pale. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Please don't call my dad." My chest burned, I didn't yell. I crouched down and said, "Ethan, look at me, you're safe here." He blinked hard like he didn't know what to do with the word safe. Then he asked the saddest question I've ever heard from a kid. "How long do I have to be good before people stop leaving?" That question rewired something in me. I didn't know I was becoming a mother in that moment, but I was. Not the Pinterest version. Not the planned version. The version built out of staying. People think taking care of a child is mostly love and groceries. It is. It's paperwork. It's school forms that demand a parent's signature. It's doctor offices that won't talk to you without legal authority. It's the constant fear that one random adult can say, "You're not allowed to do this," and your entire life collapses. After 3 weeks, I realized I needed something official, so I filed for temporary guardianship. And that's when my family suddenly remembered Ethan existed. My Aunt Talia, my mother's sister, called me out of nowhere. She didn't ask how Ethan was doing. She didn't ask if he was sleeping. She didn't ask if he'd eaten. She said, "We heard you're trying to take him. That's not your place." I laughed once sharp, not because it was funny, but because it was insane. "Take him, he was left at my door." "Leon is his father," she snapped. "Leon is missing." "He's struggling," she said, voice full of fake sympathy. "That doesn't mean you get to rewrite the family." Rewrite the family, like Ethan was a paragraph. Then her voice softened like she was doing me a favor. "Bring him to your mother's this weekend. Let us see him." My stomach twisted because the truth was, Ethan didn't want to go. Every time I mentioned grandma, his face went blank. Not scared, not angry, checked out. Like a kid who already learned it was pointless to hope. So I told Talia no. And for the first time, I heard what my family sounds like when they realize they can't bully me into compliance. They didn't argue. They didn't negotiate. They started building a case. Time passed the way it does when you're building something real, quietly, then all at once. Temporary guardianship became longer. Longer became normal. Ethan started laughing in my apartment. Real laughter. The kind that surprises you because you forgot you were allowed to hear it. He joined a soccer league. He made friends. He got obsessed with dinosaurs, then space, then baking because of the bakery downstairs. On my days off, we'd sit by the window and watch the bakers carry trays of pastries like they were treasures. Ethan would lean into my shoulder and say, "When I'm older, I'm gonna make cinnamon rolls bigger than my head." And I'd say, "Deal." At some point, slow and natural and inevitable, he started calling me Ava less and Mom more. The first time it happened was an accident. He dropped a plate and blurted, "Mom." Then he froze like he'd committed a crime. I didn't correct him. I just said, "It's okay." He nodded, eyes glossy, pretending not to care. Later that night, when I tucked him in, he whispered, "Are you gonna be mad if I call you that?" My throat tightened. "No, baby, I'm not mad." He smiled into his pillow like he was trying not to be seen being happy. For almost 5 years, we had peace. Not perfect, but ours. The first sign of trouble wasn't my brother. It was Marin. Ethan was 11 when she showed up at his school. The principal called me, voice careful, like she was walking across glass. "Miss Klein, there's a woman here claiming she's Ethan's mother." Cold spread through my arms. I drove there so fast my hands ached from gripping the steering wheel. When I walked into the office, Marin stood up like she was on stage. Her hair was glossy. Her nails were perfect. She wore a soft sweater like she'd studied what safe looks like. She smiled at Ethan like she had the right. "There's my baby," she said. Ethan didn't move. He didn't run to her. He didn't cry. He just stared at her with the expression of someone watching a stranger use his name. Marin looked at me and said sweetly, "Ava, you look tired." Then, like it was casual, she added, "I'm ready to be a mother again." At first, Marin played nice. She asked for supervised visits at a park. She brought gifts, expensive ones. She posted pictures online with captions like healing and second chances. My family, who hadn't shown up for birthdays, who hadn't paid a cent, who hadn't asked about parent-teacher nights, suddenly acted like Ethan was a family treasure. Then came Marin's boyfriend, Dean Mercer, a man who smiled too long and shook hands too hard. Dean didn't talk to Ethan like a kid. He talked to him like an investment. "What sports are you into, buddy? You ever think about private school? You know you could have a big future, right?" One evening after a visit, Marin asked to speak to me privately. We stood in the parking lot while Ethan waited in my car, eyes down, headphones on, pretending not to listen. Marin crossed her arms and said, "We're filing for custody." My brain tried to reject the sentence. "No." Dean stepped forward, voice smooth like he was selling something. "Ava, you've done your part, but Ethan needs a real home." "This is his real home," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I felt. Marin tilted her head. "You rent, you work long hours, you're alone." Then she said it softly, like poison dressed as concern. "What if something happens to you? Who does he have then?" My heart pounded because in that moment I saw it clearly. This wasn't about love. It wasn't even about guilt. It was about control. And whatever they thought they could get by taking him. 2 weeks later, I was served. Marin filed for custody. Dean filed to be considered a psychological parent figure. My Aunt Talia and my mother signed statements claiming I de-isolated Ethan from his family. My mother, who wouldn't take him for a weekend, had the nerve to write that I was alienating them. I read those papers 3 times, waiting for my brain to label them a hallucination. It didn't, so I hired a lawyer. Her name was Sonia Patel. Calm face, sharp eyes, the kind of person who makes you feel like you're not crazy even when your life is on fire. She read the filings, then looked at me and said, "They're not here because they miss him." I swallowed. "Then why?" Sonia leaned forward. "Because someone told them he's valuable." Sonia hired an investigator, not the movie type, a former compliance auditor named Miles Reese who spoke in bullet points and hated drama. Within 10 days, Miles found what my gut already suspected. Dean Mercer wasn't just between jobs. He had a trail of failed businesses, unpaid judgments, and a nonprofit that moved money in ways that didn't make sense. Marin had recently attempted to open a financial account using Ethan's information. Ethan's name appeared on paperwork that looked like the beginning of something bigger. And my Aunt Talia had been in contact with Marin for years, so the "we couldn't find her" story was a lie. Miles didn't hand me gossip. He handed me records, timelines, filings, proof. Sonia organized everything into a clean packet the court would respect. Then she sealed it in an envelope and said, "We don't show this until they commit to their story under oath." My hands shook when I took it. It felt heavier than paper should. The courtroom smelled like old wood and anxious sweat. Marin sat with Dean, her hand resting lightly on his arm like a costume. My mother sat behind them, lips pursed, looking like she'd already decided the verdict. Talia nodded at Marin like they were on the same team, because they were. Ethan wasn't there. The judge agreed he shouldn't have to sit through adults fighting over him like property. I'm grateful for that, because what happened in that room would have carved something out of him. Marin testified first. She cried at the right moments. She spoke about addiction and recovery and finding herself. She said, "Ava refused to let me see my son. I begged." I stared straight ahead and kept my face empty. Then my mother testified. "She took him and never gave him back," she said, voice trembling like she was the victim. "We tried to visit, but Ava, she's difficult." Talia added, "Ava doesn't believe in family, she wants control." Then Dean took the stand. He talked about structure and two-parent stability. He said, "Ethan needs opportunity." And then he glanced at me with a smug little smile like he'd already won. When it was my turn, Sonia guided me through facts, not feelings. Facts, school records, doctor visits, therapy notes, letters from teachers, a neighbor's statement about the stability Ethan had in my home, a coach's note about how Ethan's confidence changed over the years, the kind of evidence that doesn't shout but doesn't bend either. Then Sonia stood and said, "Your Honor, we have one additional piece of evidence to submit." My throat tightened. She held up the sealed envelope. Marin's eyes flicked to it, confused. Dean's jaw tightened like he recognized the shape of trouble. The judge took it, opened it, and began to read. The room went still. Not quiet like calm, quiet like impact waiting to happen. The judge looked up. "Ms. Mercer," she said to Marin, "is it correct that you claimed you had no meaningful contact with your sister-in-law's family for several years?" Marin blinked fast. "Yes, they didn't know where I was." The judge turned a page. "Then why do we have documented communication between you and Ms. Lane dating back over 4 years?" Talia's face drained of color. Marin opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. The judge continued, voice calm but sharpened. "And Mr. Mercer, are you aware that this filing indicates an attempt to use the child's information in connection with a financial account tied to your nonprofit?" Dean's smile vanished like a light switched off. He stood halfway, then sat back down, like his body forgot how chairs work. Sonia placed another document on the table. "Your Honor, we're also submitting school counselor notes indicating Ethan's escalating anxiety after unsupervised contact attempts, specifically, fear of being removed from his primary caregiver." The judge read again, then looked directly at me. "Ms. Klein, please stand." I stood, legs trembling. "The court recognizes Ms. Klein as the child's primary psychological parent and stable caregiver," the judge said. Marin's face twisted like she didn't understand how reality could refuse her. "Custody remains with Ms. Klein. Any visitation for Ms. Mercer will be supervised and contingent upon compliance with court-ordered recommendations." Dean shot to his feet. Sit down," the judge snapped, and Dean actually flinched. Then the judge looked toward my mother and aunt. "I also want the record to reflect, false statements under oath are serious. This court does not tolerate manipulation in cases involving children." My mother stared at me like I'd become a stranger. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just exhaled slowly like I'd been underwater for years. Outside the courthouse, the air felt different, not because my life was suddenly perfect, but because the threat had a name now, and it had limits. That night, I picked Ethan up from a friend's house. He got in the car, looked at my face, and asked the question he'd been holding all day. "Do I have to go with her?" My voice cracked. "No." He stared at me like he didn't trust good news. Then he leaned over and hugged me so hard I felt it in my ribs. "I didn't want to say it," he whispered, "because I didn't want to make you sad." I pulled him closer. "You can always say it." He nodded into my shoulder, and for the first time in months, his body didn't feel like it was bracing for impact. It felt like a kid finally believing he had a home. A week later, my mother asked to talk. We met at a cafe in daylight neutral territory. She tried to act normal for 3 minutes, and then she said, "You embarrassed the family." I stirred my coffee. "You lied in court." She tightened her mouth. "We were trying to fix things." "No," I said calmly. "You were trying to control things." Talia texted me later. We were only thinking about Ethan's future. I didn't reply because Ethan's future was never their priority until they thought it could benefit them. Sonia helped me finalize every protection the court would allow: guardianship safeguards, emergency contacts, legal boundaries that couldn't be pushed around by guilt or threats. We didn't win because I was richer. We didn't win because I was louder. We won because truth has weight, especially when you bring receipts. One night, weeks after court, Ethan and I were on the couch watching a dumb baking show. He paused the TV and said, "Mom." "Yeah." He hesitated. "If my dad ever comes back, do I have to go?" I swallowed, choosing honesty over comfort. "I can't promise what other people will try, but I can promise you this: I will always fight for you, and you will never be alone again." He nodded like he was storing the sentence somewhere safe. Then he whispered, "Okay, then I'm not scared anymore." And that was the moment I understood what family actually is. Not blood, not entitlement, not who shows up when it's convenient. Sometimes family is the person who stays, the person who does the work, the person who chooses you over and over, even when nobody's watching. If this story stayed with you, subscribe to Epic Reddit Files for more stories about betrayal, boundaries, and the kind of love that doesn't flinch when things get ugly.